because the whole first section's pretty much just all checking in and informational. So just going to use the list sort of as a flow.
Sounds good. So we are ready to go when you are, and I'll keep an eye out for Commissioner Willie.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday, January 6th, 2022 Board of Commissioners Roundtable, Washington County Board of Commissioners. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me so far this morning is Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers, Commissioner Nafisa Faye, and we're hoping soon that Vice Chair Jerry Willie will join us soon. So we have had some packet and informational updates through email for today. So as we go through information, we'll just make sure we each, be patient with one another to make sure we all have the latest and greatest information. So this being the first roundtable of the year, this is a really good time for us to check in to make sure we're synced up on various things. We did do a bunch of our preparations, drafting information in November and December. So basically I took those notes and updated them reflecting our conversation in prior months. So I'm just going to work from the list that we have for documents in the packet. So our team has updated the rolling agendas that were in the packet. We now have a set dated January 5th. So they've done a really nice job of trying to plan out the workflow so that we don't end up with meetings where one week it's massive and the next week it's really small, but somewhat steady. But it does reflect that we have a large portfolio and a lot of great programs and policies going on. So we do have a lot in the flow. And they've also used for each month sections later in the list to try and help us be alerted to some other major things going on that don't necessarily show up in meeting agendas, but are nonetheless some important activities to help us plan our work. Are there any questions that commissioners may have or any highlights from any of our three executives, Ms. Angie, Mr. Carr, or Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, that you wish to highlight for the January through April rolling agendas?
Chair, as you indicated, the meetings are full. I believe I say this every roundtable, but it's important to acknowledge that. I also do want to acknowledge that the board gets several requests for briefings, for additional information review. And so what staff are going to be working on is trying to highlight some of those major items moving forward. We will be discussing this more, and I will follow up with the board. And because we know that the board's time is not just the board days, there's also additional demands on the board.
No worries. So thank you very much to the three of you and every member of the team that toils over this list and the details to make sure that we're able to make highest and best use of our time together. The next item on the list is the roundtable flow. So we do have a parking lot of items that we have fine-tuned previously. So we have those to program in, but I want to highlight that in working with Ms. Taniguchi Dennis and her team about the various business needs for clean water services and our job as the board of directors. We're going to look to use the April 7th roundtable to really focus on clean water services business needs. So please look forward to that. Then, of course, we'll have our budget, clean water services budget day, I think on Friday, May 6th. And all of our Washington County budget meetings from there. Then we usually have quite a bit of flex on our roundtable meetings in June, July, and August. We try to take stock of where we are mid-year and are there any course corrections or whatnot. So we'll see how things plan out. And then in the fall, given that the first Thursday is before Labor Day, and really the week following Labor Day is the one where mentally we sort of all tune into, holy smokes, it's fall now. I've asked that we change the roundtable date to Thursday, September 8th. And then we usually cancel the October roundtable because we try to have additional dedicated time for clean water services in October. So that's why you don't see a roundtable listed in October. And then November and December are the months where we start to put structure in for, finishing things up for this calendar year and then setting the stage for next fiscal year and the next calendar year. And then below that, you can see the topics that we have targeted for programming in. And some of them are reliant upon some external things happening, like the climate adaptation work, the rulemaking for the state climate adaptation framework is still being worked on. So how we program that in, we had a great meeting with the cooperative efforts of our two agencies. Was that back in July or August? I can't remember which, but I do remember it well in terms of the highlighting the work that has been going on and that is currently active. So we have topics to schedule in. In addition, this is a time when I want to raise that Commissioner Fye, no, not roundtable, board initiatives. We'll come to that later, Commissioner Fye, and your question. Any questions or comments on the roundtables? It's just a plan, or a draft plan, I should say. Next in the list, we have a quick government relations check-in. As you know, we have just an awesome team working for us at the state, at the federal level, as well as across our region. Paige and Aaron are here with us today. They provided us with a brief memo to help us have our heads around the short session that's coming up, as well as the goals that we have in 2022 for moving key topics forward for the long session. And I know in their memo, they asked us some questions. So welcome to you, Paige and Aaron. It's good to see you again here in the new year. We'll turn it over to you right now.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. So briefly, the memo, the first section of the memo lays out the, the short session schedule, which is always a really fun crunch of trying to get 6 months worth of ideas in 6 weeks of process. So right now, the key question that we have for you, you have provided us with direction on the 3 priorities that your team is going to be working from, the guiding principles from which we'll also be working. But are there issues that you as commissioners want to be called in for last minute meetings or testimony, because we very rarely will have a couple of weeks to prepare and get on your calendars very effectively. So we're just wanting to bring to your attention both the time frame in which we'll be making these requests will be very tight turnaround, but also get a sense from you if there are issues that you as an individual commissioner feel extraordinarily impassioned by and would like to be the face of and have that conversation amongst yourselves about where you see each other fitting in. If there is an opportunity to testify, for example, if we manage to have the gain share conversation and there's a hearing on an amendment, would you want to be the person coming in if we can make your schedules work? Those two things being sometimes mutually exclusive. So we're looking to you for that kind of direction of if there's something there on that list of priorities that you would like to be tapped for as urgently as possible. This helps us help your staff get your calendar right.
Well, I seem to recall that you asked us this very same question, perhaps in some briefings last year or late in the year, looking ahead. So I'll just speak for myself. Hopefully I'm being consistent, though I haven't pulled out any notes. Community corrections continues to be an area that I am championing for support, grants, and funding. Then certainly with regard to the county at large impact gain share. But what I'm hoping we'll have today is some cross coverage, because there's so many variables for our schedules that we know that you are expert at speaking on our behalf, but it's always great to have a list of multiple commissioners. So if one can't make it, keep working the list.
I agree, Chair. And while we think we're good at our jobs, you have a more powerful microphone when you step to the floor.
Yeah. So that's just to kick off the discussion in our bright, shiny Thursday morning. Any other thoughts? Feel free to jump in, commissioners.
Yeah, I'd like to join the chair in that being kind of a top of mind for me as well, just because of my committee assignments with JCPAC and others. So yeah, if you could just kind of keep me in the queue on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there were two things I mentioned. Did you mean just on the public safety side, Commissioner?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yes, I think so.
Okay, just to be clear, that's all.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
So when I look at these priorities, they're all important to me, and I am more than willing to participate when and if you need me to. There isn't one particular one that I'm going to say I feel adamant that I am the person that needs to be there, but I am certainly willing to stand up and support any of these.
Yeah. And I'd also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Treese, but what you were saying reminds me that I wonder if there will be any time during the short session where some of the committees may want to either hear about how counties have leveraged ARPA funding or how we're looking at things ahead. So for example, as I've heard thus far feedback from our colleagues, such as from Commissioner Treese, I want to make sure that that you're feeling empowered to just work, all four of us, to move forward with any testimony that in your judgment would be good for commissioners to deliver to the state legislature. That's all.
Yes, we do. We just also want to make sure that the areas where you feel most versed we're calling on you first for. But I'll look to Paige about what she expects on any ARPA COVID response type of informational hearings, more likely than a policy bill, to answer that other half of that question.
Thank you, Erin, and good morning, board and commissioners. And apologies that my virtual background apparently didn't come on this morning. So here you have my living room wall. But, I actually, to Erin's point, don't also off the top of my head have any signals from our delegation that they will want those kinds of after action reports, if you will, for the federal funding. But we do know that they are going to be looking for sort of after action reports around our COVID-19 response. There's a lot of interest in how local jurisdictions, especially local public health authorities, have responded to the needs of the community during the COVID-19 pandemic and how we continue to provide those services and that education for the public. The COVID-19 subcommittee of the Senate and House Healthcare Committees will continue to meet, and those conversations will likely take place there. So thank you for being willing to step up on behalf of your team and our shared priorities with your board. And I think as session gets a little bit closer, particularly after legislative days, which are coming up next week, we will all have a better sense of the timing and flow of some of these topics and hopefully be able to give your board more of a heads up on when some of these conversations will take place. Although, as you know, one of the necessary protocols for the short session is always to be flexible because things come up at the last minute. But we really appreciate your board's dedication to our work.
Well, and this is another area where this Board of Commissioners has been all during this pandemic. So the board in 2020, as well as here then in 2021, and now here in 2022, has been exemplary in following the science and supporting the science and supporting the tremendous work of our public health team, as well as across the full Washington County and Clean Water Services operations portfolio. So I remain hopeful that the legislature will be open to virtual testimony because I think all 5 of us are very well versed and can be counted on to just step in and bring to life from a commission agency standpoint how we've worked hard to ensure that the residents and the businesses of our community are able to navigate this very complicated journey of this virus wreaking havoc in our communities and helping us recover our economy from this virus. So great. Sounds terrific.
I see Commissioner Teresa's hand, and just real quickly to your point, Chair Harrington, about virtual testimony. We will, as I mentioned, we'll provide you more information sort of about our expectations for the flow of session in terms of timeline and all that when we have it. That will include the processes. The last we've heard was in December from the presiding officers that they were expecting to have the virtual testimony continue, which is fantastic. It allows folks from all over the state to be able to participate if they can't make it in person to the Capitol. And of course, there are ongoing questions around what the Capitol's sort of openness will look like around COVID-19 and also with ongoing construction for seismic retrofitting. So there are some big questions, and as soon as we get that information, which may come just days before the start of session, we'll be sharing that with your board as well.
Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
So I'm not sure if this is the right protocol, and I'll defer to Mr. Carr here, but I do want to ask in this context, if as we look at our appointment work that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, can you help us formulate questions that are around what our legislative priorities are?
First, look to Mr. Carr to answer the procedural question about the limitations on what public employees can do.
Okay, and I'm looking at, and Chair Harrington has got her brows knitted, so I assume that I may have overstepped my bounds.
No,
but,
no, I just don't understand the question. We've adopted our agendas with our legislative priorities. I'm not following yet.
Okay,
So-
let me, oh, go ahead,
But
Mr.
that's why I didn't want to
I-
go to the answer before I understood the question.
As I understand the question, I assume that the question is, as you go through the appointment process and you ask questions of the candidates, can our team help formulate those questions in the context of your legislative agenda?
Thank you. Yes.
And I have no objection to that.
And since our
So
general
then
counsel
I
no objection, the GR team would be happy to step in and get you ideas for questions that focus in on what our legislative priorities are for when you have those conversations and go through the appointment process for each of the pending vacancies in the Senate for those Senate seats in those appointment processes.
thank you. And my point here was making sure that we're continuing to focus on what our priorities are in all aspects.
I appreciate that. And in the interest of time, if you don't mind, Chair, I'd like to move to the second piece, which I think is actually a simpler question. In the second half of the memo, we talked about what's happening in the first quarter of at the federal level, and that is essentially the NACO Legislative Conference out in Washington, D.C. So our question to you is, do any of you plan to attend? And if so, would you like Van Scoyoc to work with our delegation if they are doing in-person meetings to set up individual meetings for Washington County and our delegation? So the first question is, are any of you planning to attend the conference in February that NACO is holding, February 11th through 16th? Probably actually the 12th through the 16th is really when the meat of the conference would be for you as commissioners.
I'd just like to respond and say, I think we're, for myself, I'm waiting to see what the impact of the COVID status is. So I don't know that I'm more than willing to go, but I want to put safety first for all of us, frankly.
Yeah, for me, I thought about it. I was asked to go back with Work Systems. Unfortunately, their conference is about the 13th, 14th, 15th of April, which is a kind of a key period for me. But I agree with Pam. It depends on really the protocol. In regard to your questions and your priorities back, and I know I've kind of missed that, but it was above. Anything that has to do with work systems issues, workforce issues, I'm happy to be available. Anything to do with transportation, I'm so actively involved in a number of things. I'm happy to be involved in. Anything that comes up regarding gain share, since I've been there since the very beginning when we negotiated, I'm happy to give testimony on why we got to where we are. Other areas as needed. So if there's anything regarding clean water services, I'd be happy to participate as well. So
Thank you.
that would be my priorities.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. And I think, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fye, I just saw you go off, please.
Go ahead, Paige. Go ahead and finish off.
Thank you. I was just going to say that for any of you, should you decide to go to the NACO conference, or if things are able to open up and allow us more flexibility for travel later in the year, just know that your government relations team and our lobbying firm based in DC are more than happy to set up meetings for you, suggest conversation talking points. And if we can, of course, we'll be actively trying to encourage all of us to coordinate with our federal delegation on our priorities, probably with an increased focus on the federal work after the short legislative session. But we look forward to coordinating with you with our federal delegation, regardless of whether or not we can make it to NACO.
And Aaron, my answer to your question, the last question would be no for me. I don't plan on attending this year, especially February, and with what's going on with the pandemic, it's really hard to make a commitment. In terms of my participation keep reaching out to me, and especially for topics that are under my portfolio that you know of, both of you, Paige and Aaron, and when Jagjeet comes back as well, I'll see what I can do and lend my voice whenever you need Coach, let me know.
Thank you. And thank you all. I'm very understanding that this pandemic refuses to be the same from day to day. And we'll let Vanscoy know that at this time, we're pretty much reducing travel to meet with public health expectations. But if that changes, we will give them as much advance notice as we can to help set up direct meetings instead of sitting in the larger group with other county commissioners from Oregon. But at this time, we don't anticipate board members coming out in February. And as we move through the rest of the year, on the federal profile, we will see if there are opportunities to have remote conversations with our delegation, or if there is a time where it is appropriate and comfortable and safe to travel. We'll determine with your desires if there's an appropriate time for a DC trip for one or more of you, including making sure we're in coordination with Clean Water Services for their traditional trip out later in the year. And with that, unless there are questions for us, we are happy to return to the non-panelist portion and let you get back to the rest of your business meeting this morning. And thank you very much for your time.
Stay well, GR team. Okay, that takes us to boards and committees. We have 2 pages on that, same information, just 2 different views. The only this is a reflection of our working the list back in December, I believe it was. And the only correction is the one that Commissioner Treese brought forward on Tuesday for the AOC District 8 Vice Chair, that continues for another year. So those are the only changes that I am aware of for those 2 pages. Are there any other corrections? Okay.
Madam Chair, on one that I gave up a while back because I thought somebody else ought to take a peek at it. That's the audit committee. As you know, I have expertise on that. I know you're looking to have some support, so I am more than willing to support you in the event that you're not there.
So, so the way that appointment goes, it's at least a 3-year assignment. So it's been my understanding that I'll be seeing it through this year.
Great.
So, but thank you very much for that note. Let's see. Okay, so then that brings us to board initiatives. We also have a couple of small corrections here. We have the Washington County Board initiatives, and then later on the agenda, we'll be highlighting the Clean Water Services Board initiatives. And just the reminder that the initiatives is a tool where we are able to take stock of our time to start framing up major new policy programs as a board of commissioners or as board of directors that we want to initiate, as opposed to response from department strategic plans or in response to grant programs. But also this helps us take stock of our political capital. So one of the features that we added at least last year was just noting if there were topics that less than a majority were interested in. So all I did here was update the tables based upon our review from the prior roundtable conversations. So I just have a couple of corrections. Under 2022 board ownership, the Clean Water Services CEO annual review, we will be changing that. I went over the schedule yesterday with Diane and Mark Jockers, and because of everything that's going on, we will be bringing forward a proposal and we still have to go over this with Commissioner Rogers as the team of two to sync that up with finances later in the year. So that one's going to flex. And then the correction that we've planned the county council 6-month review, given the time to make sure that he had 6 months of performance and then the time to go through the surveys and the writing. Commissioner Willie is the team of two with me on that. And that is scheduled for February 22nd and not in January. Beyond that, everything else, I believe, I added a 2023 column and removed the 2021 column. And so those things that just carry over, I drafted into that 2023 column, just so that we can see some of these things have a progression. And so then on the second page, there's the attention, influence, and then board awareness. So first, let me ask if there are any questions on this content, and then we'll come back to Commissioner Fai's question.
Chair Harrington, minor correction to the previous agenda item, the committees on the second page.
Okay, we'll go back. Yes, thank you.
Um,
On the second page, yep.
I'm not on the homeless advisory committee. It's Commissioner Treese. Just
Okie
a
dokie. Is everything else correct, folks? Going once, going twice, going 3 times? Great. Okay, so are we all looking at the Board of Commissioners initiatives now? Great. Okay, I haven't heard any questions. So Commissioner Fai asked me a question in a one-on-one in December. And so I suggested that she bring it forward to the January roundtable. And her question was, how does something get onto the board initiatives? And so my answer to that question is, well, we discuss it, we talk about it, and we see in conversation with our executive team, is this something that is just on board members' plate? So it's something that you as a board member and your policy assistant work on. If it requires any staff commitment, that's where we have to ask our executive staff a little bit about what might be involved. And then we as a board have to decide, are we willing to potentially, if we have, I mean, our staff is fully programmed right now. So if we're going to ask our staff to do something new, then that means something else has to come off the plate. And that's where we check in to see, okay, is this going to remain just a quote unquote individual commissioners, 1 or 2 commissioners' interest, or is there a majority willing to take energy away from something else and put it towards this topic instead? So Commissioner Fai has an example of something that she's interested in, and Ms. Angie may have some updates from she and her team. So Commissioner Fai, I'll turn it over to you at this juncture.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, for that setup. I think this isn't something that I'm just interested. I think it's something that the Washington County and staff are working on that I like to see on our board initiatives to provide the necessary support to our staff and to this initiative. And this has to do with, I think I'll throw out 2 different framings: temporary housing solutions or alternative shelter options. So that's one thing that I wanted to get on our board initiative and provide the leadership support at a board level to our staff. And I think also in connection to that, I was also interested in inviting an outside speaker to, and I'm still learning, I know it's been a year, but I'm not quite sure I fully grasped how to invite outside speakers. And so that was also in connection to that. I would like to have an associate professor of land use and transportation, land use and planning at Portland State, Dr. Marissa Zapata, to come to us to present her some of the research that they've done around homelessness. So that was what, and I was, this is all, I think, in Tanya's shop and see what Tanya thinks, but it's, around February or March, whenever it's feasible to our staff, because this won't be something that, I think it's a moving train that, but the timing, I think it's something that Tanya needs to answer. So Tanya, I'll turn it to you and say, what, just tell us where the staff are on this project or this, temporary housing solutions, and when do you think it's appropriate for us to invite an outside speaker on this topic, and then to our board, because I think there's a lot of information out there that might be helpful to all of us, especially.
And
Tammy.
I would certainly benefit from a reminder of what our current strategies are and how this potential tactic fits in. And are we already executing to it, or will this take additional resources or policy commitment, especially for budget?
So those are good questions. So staff already have on their work plan coming back to the board with quarterly updates relative to this supportive housing services measure, as well as the affordable housing bond. The board last heard the update. I don't have the actual date in front of me, but I believe it was December, where Jess Larson presented an update of really the continuum of housing options that Washington County is striving towards. This question of what the housing continuum does come up from time to time. So staff are working on a graphic that can be shared both with the board and also community to remind us how we're spending the community resources in this space. Temporary housing solutions is an area that we are continuing to work on. That is an area that Ms. Larson actually mentioned within her presentation. If the board does want to have an outside speaker to provide education and information, we're happy to coordinate that. And I would think it would be most appropriate to coordinate that with the quarterly update to share how and what work the staff is doing in the continuum of housing options that we offer here in Washington County. I will state the workload of our housing department is extremely high. So if there are new initiatives outside of our current work plan that would need to be something discussed, the quarterly update, we could be very clear on what is the planned work for this upcoming year so that the board is well aware of what's on staff's work plan in the housing area.
So I have a couple of questions. So our staff has outlined the whole continuum to us, and we can all go back to both the November and the December presentations that we had from our team that show us that. Then there is the specific strategies for utilizing the funding sources that we have. And it's it's not just my understanding. We have adopted strategic plans for those various funding sources. So on one hand, I continue to support our team looking at different techniques and how those techniques fit into our adopted strategies. What I am concerned about is that by virtue of just learning more and having a speaker, that we're going to start seeing headlines in the newspaper that say, the Washington County Board is now considering safe villages all throughout Washington County, and we're going to potentially experiencing the same not in my neighborhood reaction that just painting those possibilities includes, let alone city councils going, whoa, wait a second. What are you suggesting? Are you going to move forward with this just in the urban unincorporated areas? Or are you now potentially going to look at that here in our cities? So that's why I just have a lot of questions and want to ensure that we are being planful with our staff around what are we even exploring here? Because we've been down this road with shaping programs with our homeless response and getting the formation of our homeless encampment management pilot program. So I don't see it just as a quarterly operational update, which is why I'm a little uncomfortable about it all being viewed as just a quarterly update, because we don't it's a policy step to say that we're going to move from using hotel vouchers, utilizing a one-year pilot for homeless encampment programs, to now having managed safe sleep villages. That's, there are a lot of concerns that neighborhoods have on that, and so forth. So that's why I want to express caution about how this is, how this advances. I really don't see it as just a quarterly operational update. It's fraught with peril.
I would make some comments. Nafisa, I know your passion for that, and I have an interest as well. I think that, if you and others want to explore this issue, maybe develop some structure to it, and see how it might be framed in the future, that might be the best alternative. I tend to agree if there's a speaker, it infers that this speaker is our expert in giving us some advice. And I'm not sure I even understand exactly where the department is at this point in terms of their progress. So it's a great idea, but very, premature in terms of flushing out. But I applaud you for looking at it. I think it's Clackamas County. I know you visited them and you saw their what they're doing. And it's a good idea. It just needs some incubation. I'll say that. So that's where I'm at.
So how do we incubate that if it can't get, so, okay, I think this is something that the staff is working on. It's not something that I'm working on myself. I'm not sure, like, where's the board involvement for this? Because this is something that Washington County is working on, looking at options, alternative options or temporary solutions. So how do we support our staff to make sure this is, not focused on one district, but we're looking at all the options of, and I hear what you're saying, Chair Harrington, about the headlines, but I think we can't be fearful of the headlines to really help people. People are using the streets as their waiting room. So, and the staff are working on providing solutions to those folks out there. What I'm wondering off is how do we move along with this rather than catch up? So how do we be proactive than reactive of later on? So I think if we don't include the speaker in the quarterly updates, how do we facilitate that open dialogue and open conversation? So I think Commissioner Trees and Commissioner Willie, what are your thoughts as well?
Well, wait a second. You just
Oh,
asked me a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
So, so the quarterly updates have not been used to propose new strategies. And we're just coming off of not even our full 1-year anniversary where we as a board, or at least 2 of us, given physical proximity, have taken political hits because of the slow staff response on the Econo Lodge program. So I'm not willing for our staff to go gung-ho without coming forward with how are they going to manage these ideas better so that we don't end up with confusion in our community about what we're even striving to do. That's the problem that I'm highlighting. Let's not confuse ideas with actual programs. We've learned a lot over the last 1.5 years about this.
Oh, but tiny little information to add that I forgot. This is the same exact presentation or speaker that City of Hillsborough had. And I don't remember seeing them on the headlines in the news. Just that little information out there.
So as a member of, first of all, Commissioner Fye, thank you for bringing this forward. And I appreciate this discussion because I think that we're learning a lot about our board initiatives as a whole and how we move issues forward. As a member of the Homeless Advisory Committee, I'd like to ask if this is a place where we can have that, the advisory committee can have that discussion and bring back thoughts. I'm just offering that up as it seems to me that that may be the role of that committee. Am I out of line on that? What are your thoughts, everybody?
Well, I'm not sure I can comment to that question, Pam. I think I would just want to make sure I heard all the messaging from the chair and Tanya and others. It seems that our department and certainly the staff that we have that are in overseeing this particular area have their direction and marching orders in place, and that's what they've been implementing. And I could be wrong, but I thought I was hearing this might be considered a change in direction or an additional direction, which would be difficult for them to facilitate, considering that they've got a full agenda already. I don't know anything about these Safe Sleep Villages, but if that is not part of our program right now, I would say that we need to let this SHS money and program, to use Commissioner Rogers' term, incubate just a little bit, just because it is brand new. We don't even have a signed IGA yet. And so I certainly wouldn't want to step in and say, let's either add something to it or let's change directions a little bit for a tweak. So I'm not, I mean, I'd like to do some more homework, I guess, on whether or not we should do this. I'd like to hear from Tanya. I'd like to hear from our, from the rest of our executive team as to if this would even be feasible. So I don't know. You're way ahead of me on this, Nafisa, because of obviously you've been doing some research and participating in some other venues to get more information about this. I am not there, and so I'd like us to kind of stay the course for what we're doing right now, at least for a period of time for the next 6 months again, so we can get our feet underneath us and be again to really start implementing some of these programs in the way that we've got them designed.
Yeah, I think where I'm confused is what is the process of information share without the discussion period? So I think this isn't a safe sleep village or anything. I think I should have clarified that part. And then the other thing that Jerry is that this isn't something that is different than what the staff are doing. I'm simply asking that we have informational sharing section to this, what the staff are already working on. So it's not changing course of what the staff are doing. Staff are exploring temporary solutions to housing. They are exploring alternative shelter options. All that is happening. I'm just asking, what is our process on how we share information? Like, how do we invite an outside speaker to educate us so that we're at least caught up with where the experts are, which is our staff? Since they are working on this, how do we catch up to this?
So you're asking two different questions, or I hear you asking two different questions. One is you're letting the board know that staff's doing work that a few of us are saying we're not familiar with. So that question goes to Ms. Angie to plan out how staff does a better job of letting us know what they're doing and how that affects our community. Secondly, you're asking, how do you as a board member ask to get an agenda item on the rolling agenda? And that is, per our charter, every commissioner has the opportunity to put something on the agenda. Work with Ms. Angie and her team to get it programmed in. Your original question that you asked me in December is, how do we get something on the board initiatives? So that was why I kicked this off now. It seems that that question has changed. Isn't really the question by virtue of additional information, which is good. So now it seems like there are those two things on the table. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, the third piece of it, it still hasn't been left out. Like, I think I'd like to see us this topic on our board initiative, so that it's on something that all of us are championing, or at least few of us, however it takes to get on the board initiative.
But seems to me like you're asking us to sign up for something that at least some of us don't understand what that something is yet. Because on one hand, I'm hearing staff is already doing this and the rest of us just don't, or at least I'll speak for myself, need to have the opportunity to understand how we're making investments in these sorts of techniques. That is different from what I understood from our November and December presentations. That's all. That's all. It's all about communication. That's all.
So I'll just keep talking. I feel like today is the so I would like to invite
Angie's
Dr.
got something to contribute here
okay,
too.
Go ahead, Andy. Angie, do you wanna, Miss Angie?
Did you say Tanya? Sorry. So Commissioner Fye, if you want to add a speaker, as the chair indicated, you can work with me and we can have that added to the agenda. I do want to reiterate, part of our housing continuum is temporary housing solutions. That was mentioned in the last quarterly update, and we will ensure that we provide the board with information in the next quarterly update. In addition, I will work with staff to provide a written briefing for the full board, not just you, Commissioner Fye, on what temporary housing solutions and more of an in-depth look at what that program is as a component of our full housing continuum.
Okay. Yeah, and in that topic, Tanya, then I would like to invite Dr. Zapata and her team to come present the research findings from her PSU project, examining, the different models of village pods, communities that serve people experiencing homelessness. And I think right now they're working on how-to guidebook on to support the development of those pod villages. I think some people call it tiny home, but so I'll work with you on that invitation then, and to get that agenda. And in terms of going back to the actual what the staff are doing, working on temporary housing solutions and getting on the board initiative, how do we move forward on that? Are you saying, Chair Harrington, let's wait until everyone gets the right briefings and then come back and revisit? It sounds like not everybody.
No, it's not up to me, right? I'm one of 5 here. So if there's just 2 commissioners, that's less than a majority. So then it goes under individual commissioners. But if there are 3 or more commissioners that want to step forward, I mean, the board initiatives is not a list of all the areas of policy areas we want to champion. But if I hear you correctly, you're asking that we add something to the board initiatives that indicates that 1, 2, or more commissioners are putting some significant or considerable effort into championing the idea of these particular homeless alternative programs. And if there are, as I said, 1 or 2 that'll go under individual, if there are 3 or more, then it'll go in one of those three tables.
So does anybody feel comfortable incubating this idea and putting on our board initiatives to further study and then learn and just get on this big journey of solving, hopefully, the solution? This problem.
I'd like to know more from the folks that are in the trenches every day working on our homeless issues. If this is consistent, if this is in addition to, I don't know how this fits what we're currently doing. And I certainly don't want to all of a sudden add something to this. So I'm going to defer to Tanya to ask Tanya to at least provide us with kind of a snapshot of how this would fit. Because again, I want to make sure that the direction we've given our staff working on this, that we aren't modifying now our directions on this. So I just want an update and to be able to understand how all this fits together, and then I'll come back around and be willing to have more conversation about this. So this is an important topic. I completely agree with that. But as you can see by our board initiatives page here, we've got a lot of really important topics, and I can certainly feel like I have plenty to do. So I'm not willing to take on new projects unless it really already blends and fits with what we're doing.
Commissioner Willie, I'll ensure that information be included in the briefing update, in addition to a status update on the community engagement, which staff came to the board late Q4 of 2021 in in citing temporary housing solutions such as shelters. And this was based on the feedback that we had received from the Hillsborough shelter siting. So I do think this conversation is connected to that effort as well.
So you've heard three of us asking for further information on this.
Yeah, make that four. I don't know if Pam was one of the three.
Oh, you were in the three already.
Oh, all
Me
right,
and Jerry
okay.
have all talked about maybe very well a good idea, but we need more information.
One other thing I'd add, but I know Pam wants to jump in, is again, Nafisa, you and I have chatted about this very briefly. I commend you. I think it's a good start and a good project. And there's no reason that you couldn't run with it personally and get more information for the board. I would suggest, Tanya, that our housing group also be involved. I think Comey, obviously, as director, has an understanding of what his capacity is and what sorts of things he can do. And then that's why we have a housing authority board. I mean, they certainly could hear this proposal and say, how does it fit within their workload? So I would like to hear that as well. But I don't want to be discouraging. I just think that not right now.
So I'd like to add that when we address homelessness, we need to be looking at all alternative solutions, and I believe that our team internally is doing that. What I will do is say I'm happy to work with our homeless advisory committee in my capacity on that, in that seat, to bring more information to them as well. And I am currently educating myself about what this means. I had the opportunity to talk with Nafisa about what's going on in Clackamas. I want to learn more, but at the same time, I think that we have some groups internal to our system, both at the staff level and at the advisory level, that we can educate as well. Let's put it that way. And I'm happy to work with the net and look at opportunities to bring information to that group. Nafisa, I think that will help us. For me, the issue isn't whether or not it's a board initiative. The issue is, how do we address homelessness? I mean, that's, and I think that that's exactly what Nafisa wants to do. And so, and if the board initiative piece is a way to highlight it, but at the same time, the real goal is working toward solutions. And that's what I respect Nafisa's passion about this, and she has she's led us into that passion in many ways.
Thank you. I feel comfortable ending this conversation to say that let's get you all the education and the briefings you all need, and then let's revisit this in the February roundtable again. Let's do this again, I guess, to have this conversation and see where we are as a board. And I turn it back to you, Chair.
So that would mean that we all have the bandwidth to, and that the rolling agenda and all the packet information is ready by January 27th. So it may or may not be February's roundtable.
Sure, I was just going.
Jump in, Ms. Angie.
I was
Level
going to
playing
add
field.
that I have not had the opportunity to connect with Comey and team to discuss their timeline on getting a briefing to you. So I just want to add that into the timing mix, that February may not be an option.
Go
I
ahead,
would agree.
Commissioner
It seems to me like there is more homework, plenty of information that needs to be obtained. I think February is unrealistically too soon. So yeah, I'm in agreement, Tanya, that and again, our staff are really busy. We're asking them to do another thing. So so March would be certainly as soon as I would expect to see this, and this will be a continuing dialogue, I guess. And so I'm okay with that.
I wonder though, if, Commissioner Fye has really been asking for help in terms of process and so forth. I wonder if it leads to the question of if the February roundtable date might be a possibility for having the speaker come in. And I think, yes, that's one absolutely available tactic, particularly as there's timing space in there. So, so just keep problem solving and going from there.
Okay, I like that idea. Okay, I think we'll check with the speaker, see if they're available for the February roundtable. That's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, and there may need to be additional work sessions and board briefings that happen after that, so that we come to closure either at a future work session and or roundtable from there. So we'll go from there. And as you mentioned, Ms. Angie, while we were having this discussion, I pulled out my rolling agenda because I was like, wait a minute, we had some of this whole citing topic and a program around how that would work before, either coming up to us or before, and it's not in the forward. So I was like, oh yeah, that must be one of those December things I'm not quite remembering now. So I think it'll be a helpful reminder to all of us. But I don't know that we've gone full steam ahead on adding to that temporary suite, putting in these more or less permanent villages as the Veterans Village in Clackamas County that handles 30 people versus the 6 different safe sleep village proposal that the city of Portland is navigating, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I want to make sure that as one of 5, my eyes are wide open as to what do these tactics mean, and what does that require if we make a policy decision? What does that require of boards in future years? And I don't have answers to those questions yet. So, and good grief, we're struggling enough with the communications of what a recycling company is doing here in our community. So there's going to be a lot of questions about this too, and I don't think we're prepared for that. So but that's just one opinion of 5, right? But we all want to learn more and are interested in additional information. So it sounds like we've got some great ideas and next steps moving forward. Does that sound reasonable, folks? Okay. All righty. Is there anything else on Washington County board initiatives? I think we've spent a bunch of time in prior roundtables too. All righty. So I managed to misplace my, oh, there it is. Then looking at the checklist on the agenda, we've gone through all of the documents. I just want to come back to the list that's right underneath the agenda topic. So the county council review, we all need to get our surveys returned by the end of the day this Friday. And Commissioner Willie and I are moving forward as the team of 2 on that. As I mentioned, we have a executive session scheduled in February. On the Clean Water Services CEO review, we've got a change of plan in the works there. We've already done the government relations check-in. On the town halls, we'll be coming to that topic under agenda topic number 4 later in the meeting. And so we've taken care of the committee assignments and board initiatives. So that just carries over into the informational topic on number 2, our new year areas of focus. We've got economic recovery, that happening with certainly our ARPA funds, but also with regard to our scope of work for economic development that will be coming to us in a work session coming up. Just this past Tuesday, we directed staff to develop the ballot materials for the ESPD levy replacement for the May ballot. On AOC involvement, we talked about that a little bit at the last roundtable and at the business meeting. I don't know if we had talked about the different committees. I don't know if there are any changes or any topical areas that board members want to touch on with that. Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fye, you two and I are the 3 that have been the most active. Is there anything we need to bring forward? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I just want to mention that I have not yet met with Sonia Fisher, who's chair of District 8, regarding the District 8 position in relationship to the entire AOC, but I intend to do that. I have had a meeting with Gina Nickel. So, and this is in reaction to what happened at the last election process, some bylaw changes that I think we need to propose moving forward to some of the processes behind the scenes. Ms. Nickel did talk about the fact that the bylaws need to be reviewed, that there's some archaic methodologies in determining election results, like flipping the coin. So that's one of the pieces. But that means, in essence, Chair, that I am going to be proposing a District 8 AOC meeting that's earlier than what we've experienced in the past. That's where I'm getting to. So I think we need to be talking about what District 8's role is before November of this year, of 22.
You mean before September? We usually have a District 8 meeting in September.
Is it September? But it seems like it got postponed. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Later in the year, earlier in the year instead of later in the year. That's all I'm saying.
No worries. Sounds good.
It's on my list of things to do, to talk to Commissioner Fisher.
Great. Terrific. All righty. And then the other, I'd say, this is just, these 4 bullets are just a laundry list of what I thought were the biggest things of focus for us for the year. And the last one is that community developed county strategic plan. And we already have in our plans to come back to this in the second half of the year, but just reminding ourselves that, yes, that's out there, and being mindful of that. So that's just the intent of this section. Any other thoughts, questions? Opportunity to take anything off? Okay. Well, would you like to go over the Clean Water Services initiatives now, or would you like to take a break now and come back to it? I can go either way, so I don't know what that means. Pam.
I think we should keep continuing on.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, Kevin, if you if I don't know, Diane, if you have Mark Jockers joining us here, but we all have, oh geez, my background doesn't let it show. We've all received the Clean Water Services draft initiative, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good morning, Board of Clean Water Services. Before I begin, I do want to update you on a significant supply chain issue that we're having, and I wanted to highlight how well the team does under these extraordinary conditions we're in. If you remember in the summer, we talked about the significant sodium hypochlorite supply chain problem because there was an outage of the single manufacturing facility that serves our area. So if you recall, that's a primary chemical that's used to disinfect our treated water to remove the bacteria and any viruses that remain. So not only do we need this chemical to disinfect our treated water, we also have to use a second chemical called sodium bisulfite so that we can neutralize the disinfection chemical from the treated water. There is now a significant supply chain problem with sodium bisulfite. And it's interesting to note that it's really because of the climate issue. So the weather was limiting the shipments on rail cars, and the rail car that arrived was damaged, so they couldn't offload the chemical. The same railway was hit with a significant COVID outbreak, so they had very limited staff. So it was unlike the situation this summer. It's weather, it's COVID, and it's just sort of wreaking havoc. And the team is very agile. They're quick on their feet. So they identified the problem. They began working with DEQ. They began working with partners across the state to see if they were also having issues. And they identified alternative supply chains that needed to come out of California. So they're very quick, and they figured out how to maintain their chemical inventory. But it's an interesting and extraordinary time. I have to say, as a utility manager for the past 30 some odd years, this is the first time that I've seen sort of these back-to-back supply issues. We anticipate there could be other issues with supply chain. So we are going to be reviewing our emergency declarations because the team needs to act very quickly to procure from alternative suppliers and et cetera. But I wanted to say it's just kudos to this team. If we did not have this kind of expertise at Clean Water Services, it would be a pretty tough road because of the significant use of chemicals that we do need to do to protect the river and public health. So I hope you join me in thanking the team for their fabulous work. But that leads to our draft initiatives for Clean Water Services. We are under these extraordinary times. So the team is being very nimble, not only implementing what they need to do for their day-to-day operations and responding to these types of risk issues, but they're also continuing to advance the work of Clean Water Services in several areas. So under the ownership issue, we talked about the CEO evaluation. The reason for the shift is that it makes a lot of business process sense to have the evaluation and the salary view to follow in the cycle of the start of the fiscal year. So we've made some adjustments, and you'll be seeing a board memo that will come through to make that adjustment. And I thank all of you for the work that we'll do together. It will also allow us to report on the Blue Horizons work that we're doing in a timely manner. Under influence and attention, it's the budget work, the Scoggins Dam and the safety work as it relates to getting the federal appropriations for that project. And you're seeing that in process now. Right now, the team with the Treasury moved to Clean Water Services. They're working on the investment policy, and they're getting all of their contracts in place. So you'll be seeing some work on that as it relates to investments. One significant area that we're spending a lot of time on, to be very deliberate and thoughtful, is on the business model of Clean Water Services. So you'll see an initiative here that it's about strengthening our regional and local partnerships. In particular, we've launched the discussions with Hillsborough and Beaverton about what they would like to shift to become a full service cities as it relates to running of their sanitary sewer collection system. The progress is really good. It is taking a culture shift at Clean Water Services, as well as building understanding with our partners about what it means to be responsible as a full city, full service city, and also MPDS permitting and compliance, and that's going quite well. Another part of that implementation is a deeper understanding of the cost of services and an analysis with Clean Water Services that the cities are asking to understand. They are also asking to be more engaged with our capital programs, where we're investing our money. So we're beginning to do that. Some other initiatives that weren't mentioned under here, it's the work of Joe Gall. He's working with the city managers and the teams at the cities so they can understand deeply what it is that Clean Water Services does and why we do what we do, as well as engaging the elected officials and about Clean Water Services. And Mark and his team, I really want to do a great shout out between Joe and Mark in these pieces that they're putting together. And Mark, I wanted to give you a moment to be able to sort of showcase that work that you've done, because it was a specific ask through our stakeholder engagement process that our cities and our partners have to better understand Clean Water Services. So with that, Mark, I want to have you be able to talk about that great work that you've been doing.
Thank you, Diane. As the board will recall from our training that we did in October, we had Victoria Laura come in, and we had hired Laura Media Services to go out and kind of do what I call an executive interview or stakeholder interview process with about 30 key leaders in the region, city managers, mayors, nonprofit community groups. The basic question is a little bit of, what do you think Clean Water Services should be doing, and are we doing it? I mean, it was, as you recall, it got in a little deeper than that. But one of the things that came through very clearly is we want to hear from you more. There was a general understanding of what we did, but they didn't feel like we told our story or engaged with them as much as we needed to, which was kind of perfect timing with the creation of our first ever Chief Utility Relations Officer position and the hiring of Joe Gall, because that is directly in his portfolio. So from a business model standpoint, part of the reorganization was to bring an executive level person who's focused just on those city relationships and with key customer relationships like that. From the work that we got out of Laura Media, we launched something, and we shared this in the Privy Council that we sent to you on the 20th of December. We launched something in November called the Community Connection, which is a newsletter that Joe sends out to all the mayors and all the city councilors, as well as the boards of the special service districts, on issues specific to what we're doing, trying to tell those stories. We talked to the chair about this the other day, and she said, "Boy, I'd really love to see that too." Here's a secret. It is basically the Privy Council. We're just packaging it with a slightly different audience that doesn't know us as well. The other thing that's at the bottom of this Community Connection, we have a little red button that says, if you've got questions, you can just call Gall. And that would be Joe Gall. Hit the button there and call up Joe, and he will, I don't know if he puts on a cape or whatever, but he shows up and will help. And then the other thing that came out of that is, as you know, change is constant, right? And you particularly see it in the South County area. I think down in your district, Commissioner Rogers, with the new city managers in Tigard, new city managers in Sherwood, and a lot of these new city managers in Beaverton too. So we put together a half-day workshops patterned in part on what we did with you all in October to kind of take these city managers, and what they did is they said, can I bring my assistant city manager? Can I bring my public works director? So we had about a dozen people there in December, and we took them through the treatment plant. We had Bruce Roll come in and talk about Tree for All. We had Karen DeBaker come in and talk about our communication and partnership and education program. It's been a half day, and we're going to start doing that. That was the city manager piece. We want to start doing that with elected officials too, new city councilors, so they understand the services that we provide to those cities. But those were direct outcomes of the Laura Media research, and also kind of the business model switch that we're trying to make in terms of that more direct focus on those key customers.
So the linkage of this is with Blue Horizons. One of the items within Blue Horizons, I talked about the business model and the governance structure. So all of this is building towards orienting us on where we need to go. But these are foundational steps, the Treasury move, the intergovernmental agreements, the cost of services to be able to build on a strong foundation. We did get something from Commissioner Rogers in response to the draft initiative. So I wanted to pause here and provide some space for Director Rogers to share with us his thoughts about this issue.
Thank you, Diane, but I think you just did. My question was, I know the structural change that you're talking about are paramount to success in the future. And so you've covered it nicely. There's nothing more that I would ask.
Great. Yeah, and I have to tell you the culture shift for clean water service is significant because it's moving from a regulatory sort of culture to one that enables our partner cities to become that full service city under a good and strong protection of the Tualatin River, its tributaries, and the and also regulatory compliance needs. And it's having really great discussions. The partners at the cities are coming with that experience. So I think it's really going to help drive this shift. So, and I really want to give kudos to Joe Gall so that we can have a very robust conversation. Organization development, because of this culture change that's needed, is extremely important at Clean Water Services. So it's a focus on our workforce culture, our learning and development. We have lots of folks that are early in their careers that are entering Clean Water Services. So because as the baby boomers leave, they're leaving with significant knowledge and dealing with issues like this supply chain problem. It's having people that can recognize the issue and to take action immediately. And that's what we're trying to develop with our workforce culture, our learning and development, so we can develop our next leaders. This focus on strategic planning and performance excellence is now being accelerated with our new Chief Strategy Officer. And we want to make sure that with the board, we have the roadmap so you can see what our progress is and you can see and hold us accountable to that progress. So the work that we're going to be doing at the roundtables is going to be very important for us because it's the way we can communicate what our strategies are, what we see for the future, what we want to implement in the next following quarters. And that's really what the board meetings are that represent to us. It's all of those implementation steps that we're doing, as well as time in the future for some work sessions to talk in between. But we're really focused, as the chair talked about, on these roundtable events. And I think that's really going to help accelerate our work with you on our strategic planning and also our performance excellence. Another area that we really want to communicate is Clean Water Services strategic industry value, because we're not only involved here regionally with our partners, but we're involved at the state level. We're involved at the national level because we're wanting to influence policy direction with EPA, as well as link to the innovations of other utilities so we can learn from others as well as share our innovations. But also we're now working also at the global level. Our work with the State Department and the ASEAN Southeast Asian Initiative with Vientiane, Laos, and some of these other programs. And we want to articulate the purpose of these strategic industry values that we create and what it's gaining for our ratepayers. I think that's a very important piece. And I liked it when the chair said, we have to hit above our weight class because the Tualatin River really demands that of us, because the solutions we have to create, not only for compliance of this permit, but the next permit and the permit beyond that, with the tightening regulations in a region that's growing, it takes this talent to be able to do that. And we want to be able to communicate very strategically with the board why we have certain initiatives and what they are. And we do need the board's support in many of these initiatives. And we want to be able to garner that. So that's the purpose of that strategic industry value look. Regulatory compliance strategies are continuing. We want to make sure that we're informing the board and also adequately charging CWAC with very specific looks with us. So we're going to continue that work. Water reuse is a really important strategy for clean water services. So that's in process now to finalize. We have the technical strategy map, but we also need to have the pieces as it relates to the cities and the region's understanding of water reuse and our agricultural and our environmental partners. There's some very exciting advances in that area that we'll be sharing with the board. The priority of the Ripple development and the programming is a significant component of the Chief Strategy Officer, as well as the rest of the technical team. You were able to see some of the advancements that we're doing at Ripple, and the team is very excited at getting the lab of the future under construction. So it's in design, and there's some very exciting things that we were able to share with all of you. But implementation and execution is very important here. Integrated water resources management planning. This is really that water smart basin planning approach. Now that we're going to live with the water that we have behind Scoggins Dam, we really need to be planning with our other municipal providers for drinking water, as well as agriculture and the environmental flow. So it's really looking very specifically at a program that the Bureau of Reclamation has and aligning us together to do water smart planning. The team is continuing to work on their climate adaptation framework and the strategies that are being deployed within Clean Water Services. And this has generated a lot of excitement, I think, Mark, don't you think, within Clean Water Services? And when we have issues like the snow and ice hitting our primary supply chain, it just sort of brings it all to light, right? It makes it very tangible as to why we need to plan ahead. And as I talked about on Tuesday, we were having a biosolids issue because of I-85 being closed. And that's another, we're reliant upon the weather cooperating with us, but it's helping the team plan ahead in terms of what we need to do, even for biosolids in the long run. The other part is the board training. We want to make sure we're really engaged with the board about the topics that you're interested in as it relates to our strategy and our policies. And we'll begin that conversation in earnest in spring, as well as reporting on our progress of all of these initiatives. And we'll see what's going to happen with WEFTEC in the fall. My hope is we'll be able to travel. I think WEFTEC in the fall, it would be back at New Orleans, I think, if it can happen. But a lot of our work is staying virtual. Different conferences they were hoping to open up, they've now receded back to virtual engagement. So it's an interesting time for all of us. And then the district-wide facility planning that the team talked about at our last roundtable, they're continuing to refine that, and we'll be talking to the board about it. Again, weather's impacting our administrative building complex. We were shut down because of ice and car wrecks. So we quickly had to modify our operation to make sure we could provide our permitting services and services that comes out of that building. But it's an interesting time that we're living in, and the shifts that require us to be very nimble. So with that, I wanted to shift back to Mark. And was there anything else that we should cover with the board as it relates to this work for 2022?
No, Diane, I think you've captured it well. I think the importance of being able to have this regular cadence, and we appreciate the board's attention, of these kind of quarterly pieces I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board in April. Staff is eager to do that. And these are the pieces that will guide those discussions. And of course, we have the budget in May. And then we'll have, again, our training again in the fall. So I think that's good.
Yeah, and I wanted to share with the board, like everyone, the team is very tired. They're very weary, right, over what has happened throughout these last 2 years with the pandemic. So really in 2022, we're really focusing on the hope that it brings and the personal joy that everybody needs to bring for themselves and for the work that they do. And it's really resonating with the team to really focus on this culture that is, Mark, you say it well, it's a culture of kindness, it's a culture of celebration of the work that we do together, and also a culture that's very supportive of the workforce. I think in reflection from the team, they feel very well supported throughout this pandemic, and it shows up because the team that needs to be on site and 24/7, they're there, and they're very dedicated to the mission and delivering services, as well as the team that's on telecommute. But this hybrid mode is a significant piece of our success, and we see it continuing into the future. But as Mark has shared with our team, we have to focus on this pandemic has created an experience of two different experiences, right? The experiences from the team that has been here 24/7, and then the team that has been on telecommute, and the team that's been in the middle, right? They have both telecommute and they come into the office. But the resonating theme is how supported they feel and that our workplace is safe. I think that's been an extremely important part of that piece. But this supporting of the spirit of the team is something that we're putting a lot of effort towards because of where we are with the pandemic. And we did share that with the chair of the work that we're doing together. And we do need, the team wants to hear from the board. So Mark and we're all trying to hatch a message for this new year that will involve all of the board members and team members to talk about what they're hoping for in 2022. So stay tuned. I know Mark will be knocking on all of your doors to see what message you would like to share with the team. But thank you. So with that, I want to see, have we missed anything? Could we provide any more detail that you might be interested in? But with that, I'll be quiet now.
Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Well, thank you, Diane and Mark. Great presentation, and I really do. I know the commissioners all do appreciate the work that you and your staff have done over the last several months to keep us up to speed on what is going on, and certainly all the good things that are that Clean Water Services is focused on. And this is a great update as well. For me, I always think of you for some reason when we have these significant rain events, and just wondering how much. I mean, it just seems like it's rained for like 30 days and 30 nights, or maybe is it 40 days and 40 nights or something, whatever it is. I forgot that biblical connection, but it just seems like we've had a lot of rain. And so has that impacted, operations? And, again, I drive by Jackson Bottom on my way to do some things every once in a while, and I see how much water is out there. So can you just give me a little snippet of information as to what this all this rain is doing to your operations and certainly the environment around you?
Yeah, we call it the triple whammy, right? So it's the rain, it's the snow melt that's coming, and it's on top of the soil being very saturated. So Incident Command is monitoring this. We seem to be doing pretty well, but there are areas that are showing the localized flooding issues, and the team is really thinking about what it is that we could do to help with the situation. So there are people in floodplain. So Mark, there's King City, there's places in the Tropicana area that tend to be the areas that are difficult. The ones that are the conundrum are the ones that are at the very top of the basin. Normally they drain really well, but the intensity of the rain is beginning to impact them. So right now, the team's report to me is that we're stable. So Mark, did you have any more updates from our incident command as it relates to our flooding response?
I guess a little bit, Commissioner Will, you're right on. I mean, when you see this extra water around, we are seeing extra water around too. I kind of use my my back patio as a gauge for what happens to the rest of the community. When I start getting flooding there, I know our field operations people are also seeing that in the community. We get deep into the year where the ground's fully saturated, and then you do have, I believe it's 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And it's not just the gray drizzle. We've had some pretty intense rainfall events just in the last week. And that is where we have the struggle, obviously, like Diane said, is in areas that are built within the floodplain, kind of homes, you know, neighborhoods that were plotted before about 1975. And then the other challenge we have are places that do not have functioning stormwater systems. And we see some of that build up. And as Diane said, it's Tropicana and Devonshire, it's areas in King City. There's a few places like that. I know we have an area right now over, I believe, I'm not going to say the name of the street because I'll have it wrong, where we are having some flooding. It's not structural. It's not, I mean, I think it is hitting some garages, but it's not inside homes yet at this point. But I think that there's just no time for that water to drain. We do have crews that are available 24/7. We don't get a lot of calls at night often because people are asleep. We usually get them first thing in the morning. Been hearing about that a little bit. The other place that we see weather is at the treatment plants, right? Because we see flows come up. And that's something we try to monitor closely. And so far, they've come up, but that hasn't created any problems on that side.
All right, thanks, Mark. Thanks for that update.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
You were off and I couldn't hear you. Diane, just a couple of messages real quickly. And I think the board knows I'm very interested in this area for a long time. But one, thanks to Joe Gall, he brings that expertise from the cities. It's really important that we understand their customers. And as customers, they need to fully comprehend what we're doing and appreciate it. And I think they do, but it's not intuitive. Secondly, in regard to what we're doing on the county side for urban services issues and what our strategic plan might be, for a long time, there's been a great rub among certain cities and clean water services over your capacity to provide sewer service. They envision in their charters, which they are full service cities, and they would like to take on those responsibilities. So I know you're at the very beginning of your discussions, but even going back to Bob Cruz days and him going out trying to negotiate with these cities, and they have a very different concept. It's I guess I'm guilty as well. When you buy something, you think the warranty is for everything, and they say no, it's more specific. So I think those negotiations are going to be very important to allow them not to feel like Clean Water Service is a competitor. And with them in certain urban growth areas, I think it's going to help us financially as well as them understand their responsibilities when they completely comprehend what our package of service is. And so that whole transfer issue this is about a 25-year-old matter, a 30-year-old. For anyone who's new to the board, you wouldn't know that, but it's been going a long time. So I just want to compliment your staff. Taking it on. It's a tough, we don't need to kick it down the street anymore. Let's just deal with it. And so, thank you.
And
It's part of what we've invested in with the chief utilities officer as part of our budget investment decision making. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the new things that is arising in the region is this discussion about bringing the semiconductor industry back to the US in terms of production. So, Mark, did you want to give a real quick sort of synopsis of the conversation that's beginning in the region? And we do believe that clean water services is a key part of the discussion because of infrastructure.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and some of you may be aware of this reshoring initiative that I know the city of Hillsborough has been involved in City of Forest Grove as well, and a few others have been looking at what are supply chain issues, what are impediments, what are opportunities associated with the semiconductor industry in Washington County. That's exactly who should be doing that work, right? The economic development folks. I think what we saw there is the infrastructure side, particularly since these are wet industries. These are typically pretty wet industries. So they use a lot of water and they produce a lot of wastewater. We've gone forward, Joe has gone forward, Joe Gall has gone forward to those economic development staff and say, we want to be part of this discussion because our infrastructure planning is an important part of those decisions as well. And that's something that's really has just kind of emerged in the last week or so as we've started to step in to try to look at that pre-planning. We have had, as you know, kind of, we have a just-in-time capital program, right? We don't want to build assets and have them sit there empty for a long time. And we've done a good job with that, particularly serving the expansion of Intel and pieces like that. But should we be just a little bit earlier now? Should we start pre-planning to have these things ready to go sooner? So those are some of the discussions that we want to have.
Yeah, and that's been a great story of how we've been able to manage our rates with this concept of just in time and not having a lot of idle capacity. And a lot of you that are involved with the business sector, that's always that management of capacity management. But I do think this is going to really help us think more through in terms of what it is that we need to be strategically prepared for as this region recovers and as the region begins to grow in some of these other sectors. But we'll keep the board apprised of it and how the conversation is developing.
Board, any other questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you very much, team, for bringing this forward and helping reinforce our understanding of all the different interconnected pieces, strategies, tactics, risks, finances, organization management, all of that. Really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, at this juncture, we have one major agenda topic, but it really has a couple of different pieces to it. Discussing the fiscal year 23 budget guidance and budget sync up, as well as the town hall topic and the community investment funding document. So I'm thinking at this juncture, commissioners, that now may be a good time for us to take a 15-minute break and then pick back up with the team on those last topics for the roundtable before we then also go into executive session. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, well, according to my network clock, it's 10:47. So why don't we come back at we'll round off and say 10:05, or excuse me, 11:05. Great. We'll be back here then. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and just like that, we're back. Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Fye. This is new topical information, so I want to make sure we're giving one another there we go. We've got everybody. So we have 3 different items under this section of our meeting. So I'm going to turn it just over to Ms. Angie to take us through these items. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Harrington. And I would like to reintroduce the board to our interim Chief Financial Officer, Rodney Rhodes. I had introduced Rodney to the board briefly after his start and really appreciate his leadership during this interim period prior to the hiring of a permanent CAO, and his long tenure and history in finance and county, city, and special district finance has already proven to be very valuable. So thank you. And Latricia Tillman, our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, is also joining us. So the 3 items that we want to chat about today is really budget sync up as we can start the significant work of putting together the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So the 3 items are the budget sync up, budget guidance, board priorities. Number 2, follow up on the budget town hall that the board recently held, as well as a discussion of the upcoming March budget town hall. And then finally, just circling back and closing the loop on our August discretionary funding conversation with the board. So with that, we'll start out with the budget guidance. Included in your packet is a memo which outlines our proposed budget guidance to departments this year. We are continuing to manage special funding such as ARPA, our regional bond measures, and we are ensuring that we are aligning those funding sources to those appropriate expenditures. I will note we are continuing to be cognizant from a personnel and expenditure perspective of ARPA funds. Any personnel positions funded with ARPA are identified as limited duration to ensure that we have financial sustainability when those funds expire in 2024. We have a staff team that is starting the work of identifying baseline of county services, service levels, and funding sources. This information will not only be helpful in future budget processes, but also helpful as the board kicks off the strategic planning conversation later this year. So for the budget guidance, the guidance that we are proposing for this year to our departments is funding only items that meet our most essential service levels and projected growth within the county. And also that includes providing programmatic funds to support the board initiatives as previously discussed in today's meeting. Limit FTE growth. We are asking staff to only propose the highest priority and to actually prioritize their staffing needs within their department. 2 positions that we are planning to include in this upcoming budget is the courthouse planner position. If we don't start the courthouse planning process, we are in essence losing a year at a time. And so this is an investment in the future and to ensure that we have adequate courthouse space is a core function of our essential service. In addition, the board had authorized the construction career pathways position. So that position will be included in this upcoming budget cycle. We are implementing for the first year a budget equity tool. As previously shared with the board, this will be an iterative process. So we are in our learning mode and development mode of this tool. So more information to come This is anticipated to provide baseline data that we will then iterate in future budget processes. Using an equity approach to allocate discretionary funds, and Ms. Tillman will talk more about the discretionary funds and the 2-year process that we propose. Minimize additional capital outlay unless it's absolutely critical. One of the items that we have determined that is critical is investments, for example, in our jail cafeteria due to health and safety needs. Begin the development of a 5-year human capital plan for long-term staff and facility planning. So right now, we do not have a 5-year human capital plan that we can project out and have a long-term financial roadmap or plan. So this will be integrating our current financial planning with our human capital planning in the future. This is also incredibly important as we look at a strategic facilities plan, because we need to know what our service levels are, what our human capital needs, what our financial resources are, to align that with what our facility needs are in the future. And then we do have many state and federal requirements due to recent legislation that will be impacting our budget. That is going to come primarily from the public safety and justice area. Erin Calvert is actively working with those departments. And so we will be providing you a briefing memo of what those anticipated needs are prior to the budget, so that the board has a full insight into what those needs are. And then other considerations, of course, I would say this is baseline: produce a balanced budget, maintain our general fund balance at 15 to 20%. And we will be taking a closer look at our fee schedules this year. That is not a significant, I would not say that's a significant new revenue source. However, this is an area we need to take a closer look at. So I would like to ask at this point, Mr. Rhodes, did I forget anything?
No, I think you covered everything really well. The one thing that I would add is that we have had some conversation of late regarding the formulation of a CIP, a formal CIP that actually gives you a 5+ year snapshot of some of the major capital projects that the county will be undertaking, how that the funding will be phased, with a description of the project for the general public, so they can understand a little better about some of the things that Washington County is working on as well. So more to come on that, but we are working to begin that process as we go forward.
Chair.
Well, that's where I have no questions about the guidance and direction that we've been provided and where you've summarized we're heading. But what Mr. Rhodes was touching on is something that I'm trying to get my head around, because it relates to our capital planning is something that I've been pushing us to do for 3 years. And we initiated a project, and I'm just a little bit confused, or I'm not clear rather, about the roadmap ahead. So for example, I've continued to include in our board initiatives the facilities master plan, but also the notation with the laundry list of those various needs that at least 4 of us on this board have already been informed about. And I did just double check from my notes that we on March 8th, we have the strategic facilities plan update coming. I'm wondering, how should I understand the relationship between that strategic facilities master plan that brings all these needs together versus a very specific year-by-year CIP for the next 5 years, right? Because our problem is we've been dealing with needs very ad hoc, or the county has for decades. And we're now at a point where we have to look at this comprehensively. So how do we go from this project that has really been impacted by our ability as an organization to act on this planning COVID for 2+ years now, versus this very specific. So I just need a little bit more clarity on that. And I'm happy to hear if I should just wait until March 8th and subsequent meetings, and that I'll have an opportunity for further clarity. That's a fine answer too.
Yeah. So that was actually going to be my answer. Stay tuned to March 8th, and maybe a preview of what's to come in March 8th is a phasing of the facility strategic plan. And the reason for a phasing model is we do need to get kind of our arms around and the financial planning around what are the 5 to 10 year financial needs, so we can complete that roadmap, as well as how do we phase into that 50-year facility strategic plan. So more to come on what that looks like.
So let me just give you a heads up that I think I'm struggling to get to know your approach. We don't have a strategy yet. So a phased implementation may be totally appropriate. But first, it would be great if we could start with the comprehensive collection, right? And how do we develop a strategy that then can be operationalized over phases?
You will hear that in the March 8th
Alrighty.
I think we're not using the same language. So thank you for asking that.
That's why I'm trying to give a heads up that I think this is a new space, and we're going to need time to all develop that comprehensive vocabulary. Thank you. It'll be worth a lot. Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
Well, Catherine, your issue is similar to mine, but I want to segue completely in a different route. The genie's out of the bottle. We're never going to put people back in buildings and spaces. I mean, people are going to work remotely, and we need to get that in mind, and we need to understand that maybe our footprints are going to be completely different. So I agree with the chair and saying we really need to have some plan instead of just going out and willy-nilly building space. The largest expense that this county has, and any municipal government in Oregon has, is labor. And one of the things that the private sector is struggling to do, and they're coming up with various ways of monitoring, is production. You can say I can work at home, Roy, all I want, but unless you have some way of monitoring my output, I might have spent a whole lot of time out at one of the local parks and very little time on what we've produced. So what's happening in the private sector, and I suspect some larger governments, is they're putting in a lot of IT to monitor what's really happening. And it's not as simple as to say, it's the old time clock, I punch in, I punch out. It's not, I turn on my computer and then I turn it off. They're saying, what are the keystrokes? What are people really, really doing? So when I see things about we're not doing any capital, and I understand why we're doing that, capital is nothing. Our buildings are not, it's kind of like Intel. The buildings is nothing. It's the equipment inside. It's really the other costs. In ours, it's the intellectual capital of the employees. So I'm hoping that at some point, this is my cry in the wilderness, same thing with Diane, that you're really looking at what are your processes to monitor active participation by those who are remote working, actively looking at what the production is. And that will only be accomplished, and there's a lot of different programs, only be accomplished if you start buying some products that are going to be implemented. Now, people aren't going to like that because they're going to say, I don't like to be monitored, but we all are monitored on outflow. I mean, it's just the way it works. So tell me about what you're doing in that area. The rest might be bored. If it's too long an answer, you can tell me off camera, but if you save a bit of production costs, that's the huge value in what we all do. So that's my question.
I think Rodney had an initial comment he wanted to make on that.
Yeah, I just, everything that you're talking about is just so in line with exactly the conversations that we've had behind the scenes as staff. How the overall countywide strategic plan fits into not only a 5-year human capital plan, but a 5-year or a long-term facilities plan, an IT infrastructure plan. All of those things feed exactly into what you're talking about, Commissioner. And I think that from my perspective, what I've seen in my short time is that you're absolutely right. The days of brick and mortar structures to house staffing have really, I think, are going out. Obviously, there is still brick and mortar that has to be in place. The question then becomes, how does that technology feed into it? So I think that those are all great questions and questions that we've had internally as part of our discussions. How we get there is just going to take some time. It's not something that we can flip a switch and have overnight, but it is going to take a little bit of time. But I think where you're talking about going is exactly where the staff is talking about going, and that's kind of an exciting process to go through. It's going to take a little time, but we'll get there.
What will be coming to the board this spring too is our information and technology systems first strategic plan. So the board can have some further insight, not only just in what you see in a budget document, but the approach that we are taking with our technology services and technology investments over the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Are there any other commissioner questions or comments at this juncture? So I'll ask just a calendar question. I know that we're seeing calendar events show up on our calendar, but I don't know that the board has been provided with a budget development calendar as it affects us. So I'm assuming, with the absence of that right now, prior emails in December said it would be coming. So I'm assuming that we've had our budget direction sync up and that our next milestone is getting the proposed budget. Because as far as I know, there's nothing in there. And then there are the meetings that are showing up on my calendar.
Yeah. So I apologize for that. I thought there was actually an email that was sent to accompany the calendar appointment. So we'll make sure that you get that information in written form as well. I do want to indicate there is, in the middle of that part, there's a March budget town hall that the board had previously discussed. And so Latricia will talk about the follow-up on the last town hall and how that fits into this process.
Well, and so let me ask my colleagues, it may be that I'm either not recalling an email or I misplaced it. Colleagues, did I miss something? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, help me pick back up. That'll be awesome. And yes, I did read the material that you all have presented or provided to us for today. Okay. It's just a busy year. Okay, so next then, would it make natural sense for us to go over the town hall information?
Town hall, yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Good morning, Chair Harrington and board. It's nice to see everyone today. I will just do a quick walkthrough of the memo that is attached to the agenda, which includes a summary of the December 2nd quarterly town hall focused on centering equity in our budget process, and then just a couple comments about what we're envisioning for next steps. So again, thank you everyone for your participation in that town hall. We feel like it was a very successful event with in partnership with numerous culturally specific community partners to help make sure that our communities were represented in the participation. As you'll recall, it was a virtual town hall. We had breakout groups. We had discussion based on county departments and the subject matter specific to the service area within those departments. As I mentioned, we had great attendance, about 230, just shy of 230 attendees, and over 500 people watching on YouTube, which was wonderful. And we were able to provide the town hall in English, ASL, and Spanish. And the memo outlines some of the highlights of the community feedback. We were able to identify a number of themes in the comments that crossed over the various subject areas, including a need for language access and culturally specific services. There was quite a lot of energy around mental health and addictions, both thinking about it from the perspective of social stigma, as well as how to integrate more the mental health response with our public safety response. And then a number of comments around inclusion, county resources and how people know about them, all the great work that the county does, how do people access that and understand that, community building, education, and recreation. I won't go into all of it, you have it in front of you. There were a number of questions that participants asked, and we are finalizing answers to those, and they will be posted externally so that participants in the town hall can also see the themes, but also see the answers to questions that they posed. In terms of next steps, the next quarterly town hall will be in March and will also be focused on engaging with community around budget equity. It will be an opportunity for you as a board to share with the community how the county is currently building equity into the administration of county dollars and how we will continue to do that as we move forward. I think those might be the high points.
Latricia, the chair has a question.
Go ahead.
So it was a great town hall. Thank you again to you and all the team members who were involved with all of bringing the material forward and the logistics so that people felt welcome, safe, and were able to ask questions and participate. It also came on the heels of the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District listening sessions. I know I was only able to make it to one. I know Commissioner Treese was able to attend. There may have only been two, but she participated in both of those. I appreciate that. Commissioner Fye may have participated in one of them as well. Sorry if I'm not bringing all of that forward and giving justice to everyone's participation. Subsequent to that, it seemed like there were a lot of questions that people had about just understanding governmental budgeting, not necessarily Washington County specific budgeting. And really the kind of constraints that we as public agencies of different types, right? Because Clean Water Services as a ratepayer is different than a general property tax, than their general property taxes and levies. So just that basic 101, if I could use that analogy, of revenues and budget implementation. And we mentioned this previously because we're wondering about how that, if I could just think of it like a bubble that some community members have around what that is, and that education, and then are getting to this March town hall. And I'm not sure how we might go about that, if there's just information ahead of time that may already exist elsewhere, that we can point people to as something to read in advance of that town hall, or just have an additional, half-hour presentation or briefing for English speakers, Spanish speakers, whatever other languages we want to support in advance, to bring that to life, that general civic context. I don't know, I'm in idea space, believe me, just idea space. So what do you think? And I particularly want to call on Commissioner Treese, because she experienced these questions more than I did. And then I think Commissioner Fye has, through her civic engagement with her district, has experienced some of this as well. Thoughts?
So, Chair, I just want to clarify that you're speaking about the town hall, the town halls that were focused with Aaron Calvert and others around the ESPD. Am I right about that?
Yeah,
okay.
The listening sessions that we had on ESPD. Yep.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify. And I've talked with Latricia about those, that there weren't large numbers at those events, but there was one consistent message, and that was that people didn't understand the budgeting process. And why isn't the ESPD, for example, rolled in to the budget? That was a consistent question that we had. The other feedback point from the attendees that were there was that they wanted to make sure that there was that the ESPD stayed in place. So that's the feedback loop that I can provide for you on those.
Well, and I remember the other piece of that is, well, why don't you just increase the property tax for ESPD versus this levy, right?
And yes, and that's what I was trying to say earlier, and that's why it was so valuable to have Ms. Calvert there to be able to discuss what the property tax does and doesn't do, and why we need to have this continual ask to the community regarding ESPD.
So this question has come up when we went through our Budget 101 session in the spring of 2020. It comes up every time we go through one of these levies, and it comes up every single time we have a budget engagement about why do you have these special funds and whatnot. And so it really comes to, how do we just have some general material available to those in advance? And what I'm trying to highlight is, rather than waiting and experiencing it yet again from a few folks and detract from the overall goal of the March town hall, might we, could we, should we, all those questions, have something easily consumable that will help those that don't get the general context going in. Otherwise, we keep reinventing the wheel for a select few every single time.
And I believe that's why I brought back from AOC that video that was produced in Central Oregon about what property taxes are about. And I've talked with Philip Bransford about that as well. So just FYI, that's part of that loop, I think, Catherine.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything today that helps answer the question yet. That's all.
So I will note that we do have a budget overview video made by our former CFO, Jack Leong, and that is located on the county's town hall page, which is a link off of the Board of Commissioner page. It is a YouTube video, which means that it can be accessible in subtitles in over 100 languages. We can look at that. We can also do a little bit of research to see how other jurisdictions have attempted to demystify county budgeting processes to see if there are other elements to an instructional county budgeting 101 that might be helpful for community, to increase community capacity to understand both our process and the constraints and the various funds that we received and then are able to allocate out to meet community needs.
I'm really responding to that, the demystifying. Yay, thank you.
Are there any other questions about either some of what we heard in the town hall or where we would like to go in March?
For the scheme in 2021, we tried different days of the week, different times of the day. I think there was a Thursday night, there was a Saturday, there might have been a Monday. What are you thinking in terms of best practices that we might try in 2022 is one question. And then the other thing I'm a little concerned about is March, okay, but we have a pretty heavy load coming up with budgets in May, and it gets really iffy in Q2. So just
So
good luck getting those on calendars in advance. So that's all.
So one of the things that we've talked about, I know staff has told me that last year we did the public hearings during the evening for all of our various funds. One of the things that we have been somewhat discussing, but really haven't got into a lot of in-depth discussion is the potential for proposing that some funds public hearings be held during the day, and then maybe the bigger, more robust funds, I'll call them, that might need some additional discussion be held in the evening as a possible alternative. And so we've not landed on it. We've kind of talked about it in some of our executive budget committee meetings in the recent weeks, but that's something that we have discussed because I know the last public hearing went fairly long. And so maybe that's an alternative that we could explore if the board was willing to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I may have misspoken. I was referring to our town halls. Yeah, for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. What we've learned in prior years is we really need to get calendar holds on commissioner calendars at least 6 weeks in advance for those and build constructs around them in advance. So we have some idea of what topics, who we're going to need for subject matter experts and so forth. So
yes,
that's all.
My apologies.
Oh, no worries. I might have misspoken. But I appreciate staff's flexibility and not just flexibility, but our continuous learning from year to year, right? And being engaged with our community. It's an all hands on deck.
I would just say that we will work to get those quarterly town halls on your calendar as soon as possible. I think it's probably a little early to say what's a best practice, given that we have 1 year or two, under our belt within a COVID environment, and but moving the times and days of the week around as we did last year with a Saturday and some different evening opportunities for engagement will give us some additional data as we go forward to identify if there really is a community preference, what works better for community. It's also hard to know if participation is higher or lower, depending on how the community resonates with the topic. So I think we'll need more data to determine what's a best practice, but we do know best practice for the board is to get the dates on your calendars as soon as
And
possible.
they are BCC town halls.
Yes.
Yeah. Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. I just want to say the one place where I think we did learn important information was the model that was used for the last town hall, in my estimation, was significantly better than the other models that we have used. So I would encourage the replication of that approach. That's the one. While I agree with you that we've just got 1 year under our belt in a COVID situation, we did see a real difference, I think, in relationship to the different models that were used for the various town halls. So I just want to encourage the continued use of that last methodology.
And I would say that part of the success of that last methodology was the partnership with the various community-based organizations as well. So we'll continue to do that as well.
I'll observe that we had the June town hall where the focus, I think it was June, where the focus topic was mental health. And I know I was able to leverage the availability of that information throughout the remainder of the year as people were asking me questions where they were looking to get more familiar with what we were doing with mental health crisis support and then overall behavioral helpful with regard to constituent and community engagement in my work. Anything else, commissioners, that you have for Ms. Angie and Ms. Tillman? I guess, Ms. Angie, it's back to you.
Let's transition into discretionary funding and our framework. Ms. Tillman?
Okay, thank you. So in your packet, you have a process proposal for future discretionary community investments. And this builds off of the conversations that happened last budget cycle, where both the board and your budget committees asked for suggestions on how to build equity within the budget process. And then there was a conversation in August with an initial proposal for how the board could handle discretionary community investments with an equity frame. Given the timing that we find ourselves in at this point within our next fiscal year budget adoption cycle, we're proposing that we have a two-step process. And the first step in the process would be to modify our guidance language and align our investments according to the three main categories of discretionary investments, which are non-departmental, community network, and what is currently or in past budget years has been called lottery funds, but the proposal would be to retitle that to economic development to reflect the intent of those lottery funds. And then there would be some alignment of those of the investments going forward to reflect the intent. So non-departmental investments would focus on regional, state, and national organizational membership dues and your Board of Commissioner allocations. Community network investments would reflect various partnerships that are, again, non-departmental, not specific service delivery related, but partnerships with various organizations to address community needs and partnerships that the board would like to invest in. And then the third one would focus on economic development in alignment with the guidance that is provided by the state lottery funds, with a specific focus on job and career opportunities, economic development, and financing public education, specifically as it relates to workforce development and workforce shortages. So that would be the recommendation for this budget cycle. And then there's another recommendation for the next budget cycle. And Chair Harrington, I see your hand up and I can pause here.
Thank you. I just have a question under that section on the FY 22-23, and it's on the community network investments. And I'm thinking maybe I just don't follow the layout here. So 747.5 million thousand total. So says funding historically allocated to RAC plus 193 for 20, and then special projects for 50K. So are you saying 747 means everything goes to RAC plus 193? That
No.
whole section just doesn't.
Let me clarify that. So in the non-departmental investments historically has had multiple types of allocation. So if you look one row up, the recommendation is to focus non-departmental investments. And so past investments that are there, the recommendation is to move those into places that make more sense and align better. So there is a RAC investment historically that came out of the non-departmental investments in the amount of $193,420. The proposal is to move that from the non-departmental investment down into community network investment, where RAC also has historically been funded out of. So that would change the allocation there going forward. And then there was a special projects investment that also came out of the non-departmental investment category. And the recommendation is to move that into the community network investment as well. And so those two reallocations help to, I just feel like it's tidying up those budget areas, and those reallocation would change the dollars available to the board to allocate from the $747,000 to $999,000.
Thank you.
So it doesn't presuppose any board allocations going forward. It just changes the amount of dollars available for the board to allocate.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't follow before. That helped a lot. Thank you. That's it for my question on that. Does anybody else have questions? Let's say,
Commissioner Rogers.
keep going. Oh,
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Tanya. 2 or 3 comments. One, I like that we're going forward in some manner to analyze and organize that. Let me tell you what I personally, just one person, don't want to deal with. And that's $100,000 allocation that we have to the board. That was hard fought. That was a situation that we put in when we did the SIP. And I think this board has had some discretion, and the prior boards have had. So I personally don't want to deal with the 100,000. Secondly, the proposal, we did that once before. I can just tell you some history where you took proposals. There was so much lobbying of board members. It was terrible. I remember we all threw up our hands and said, we're never going to do this again. Well, history repeats itself. Here we are back again. But I can tell you that every nonprofit in the world will ask you to become their advocate, and you'll be taking all these proposals in, and then we'll be negotiating with each other. Maybe you just need to refine that a bit. I think that's something that we've learned from history. I guess we can continue to make mistakes by putting our hand on the burner, but
No, this is not that multi or $1 million item we
No.
did in 2019.
no,
This is the 20K per district commissioner.
no, that's a different subject. The 20 per district, I'm sorry, I don't even want to tackle that, but there's another one down here. It says that we're going to take proposed funding limits and we're going to take, where is it? Right here. I'm looking
Are you
at
on
it.
page 3, Commissioner Rogers, of the
I was,
document?
and I lost my place, but it, yeah, propose, where it says we're going to take proposals. There's a timeline in there.
So I believe you're referring to proposed evaluation and accountability. This is on the bottom section of page 3 of the document.
So we're
Right.
not there yet. It hasn't been presented yet, right?
No, it's not, but I'm just saying that it's a 2-year proposal. And what I'm telling you, what I like and don't like, the $100,000, again, I like to go to the commissioners. I don't like the other, but that's just me. The other thing, comments just really quickly, and I'm looking at both years here. 40% is way too high, in my opinion. I like a third at most. That's again, my personal opinion. The second issue is I think, our brains all work different. Mine's all in boxes and I can tell, how things flow down, but there are some organizations that this 40% or my proposal, 33% wouldn't really apply to, and that's like the Visitors Association. I mean, we are the source. There isn't any, there's minor little bits, but that revenue doesn't apply. But for others, I think we need to figure out what that format is. And I do like, in an earlier item, I didn't address it, but there was somebody who brought up, maybe more than one, who brought up the issue, why do you go to the same organizations all the time? How come we never get a shot? And I don't know who it was. I don't know what organization they're talking about. But I think it's healthy from time to time to look at some of those contracts and say, let's take proposals. And it may be painful because somebody may not have a great proposal we've used for a long time, but I'm hoping we can work that process in. So anyway, I'm looking at both years. I understand it's too late this year to try to get everything done, but you're kind of segueing because you're showing 23-4. I'm looking at that and saying, here's my thoughts, my personal thoughts.
I appreciate that, and I'm happy to walk through the second phase of this process change. So with the change in the purpose, like honing in, focusing on the purpose of those 3 discretionary investment areas, then the process would be that for non-departmental, when we're thinking about the membership dues that would come from a CAO recommendations per the normal budget development process, the board members would be able to determine their investment priorities for their allocation funds. That would be how that process would work. For community network, what we would like to do is a competitive funding proposal that is run through the CAO based on board determined priorities and outcomes.
And I just add to that, it would be run through the CAO, but it would be managed by the finance department, similar to procurement or other grants.
And then within the economic development category, there's we have multiple uses of those dollars. In some cases, we have economic development related dues that we pay, and so that would come through the CAO's budget process. We have internal county departments that are funded using lottery dollars. So again, that would come through the CAO or via the normal budgeting process. And then we do have external community funding, and that would also, the recommendation is that that would also go through a competitive funding process. So that would increase the transparency and the ability to bring an equity lens into the determination of allocations by asking organizations that are requesting funding to answer specific questions related to how their proposals would advance equity and how their organizations are building equity, diversity, and inclusion best practices into their work. So the next year proposal, next budget cycle proposal goes on to include a timeline, which we would want the board to make decisions early so that we can give community-based organizations a long runway to be able to develop their proposals and also have a manageable timeline for reviewing those proposals and weaving them into the budget process. And then there's several equity criteria that are proposed for the competitive process. We did put a number in around a top threshold for organizational partners of 40%. I agree that there is an opportunity to talk more about what that threshold is. And I understand in my conversation with board members that there's a range of opinions on what is a reasonable upper limit. In conversations with colleagues in philanthropy, there's a lower limit that philanthropy organizations look at relative to IRS rules about nonprofits and a term they call tipping. And they tend to want to see a lower threshold than what is proposed here as well. And then we would want to have some clarification around whether the competitive process is for a one-year grant or a longer organizational partnership. And then the final element of that proposal would be around evaluation and accountability. And one of the things that I've learned is that it has not been a required practice that funded organizations submit an annual report. Some have and some haven't. It's not a requirement. And we haven't had a standard format for reporting or a standard format for evaluation. So things that I've heard the board ask for is what is the return on our investment for Washington County residents, particularly if it's a regional investment, and then what are the process and outcome measures that are being committed to by recipients of funding. And then another suggestion that I thought was great and it is incorporated here is that one, we publish the annual reports publicly since they are expenditures of public funds, and that if an award exceeds $100,000, that the board may want to invite those recipients to come present to the board about how those funds are being utilized.
This is fantastic. Really appreciate how you have taken the board's direction from the August 10th work session and helped us better understand how we operationalize as an agency that direction. Really fantastic. And I have some other comments, but I just wanted to help kick off the conversation. So commissioners, questions and comments. I see Commissioner Treese is unmuted already. Go ahead.
Well, and Chair, you beat me to the punch just a bit. I was going to say the same thing, that it's really nice to see this organizational approach and a structured approach. I tend to agree with Commissioner Rogers about that 40 versus 30 right off the top, but that doesn't matter to me as much as the fact that we are having these discussions, that you have laid out what the criteria is in relationship to how we support, how we incorporate the equity lens to this. So I'm pleased. I think that all of us previously struggled with why are we providing these types of resources to these organizations? We don't have a feedback loop. We don't have a lot of different things, and this really does ground us in a process that I think with some tweaking we all can support. So thank you for that.
Other commissioner thoughts? Following, thumbs up. Great. I will just close with my comments. In addition to really appreciating the follow through, as I've already mentioned, I can really see how this 2-year process really helps us be intentional about priorities and outcomes, really, versus, maintaining the historical status quo, right? This is really great. It's not just some ad hoc, but it's strategic. It's reinforcing community outcomes, really fantastic. We've already heard feedback from both Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese, and I think it is worth scoping out further under the proposed funding limit, just as you mentioned about the range of opinions, that top threshold of 40% versus 30%. So I think following up and making room for that range and further learnings and discussion will be great. But my point is, under that proposed evaluation and accountability, I appreciate return on investment, as you say, for Washington County residents, but I think there's one other missing element, is that return on investment towards those desired outcomes, right? Because all of these investments through this process are intended to support the board priorities and outcomes, right? And so how do we ask our recipients to bring us back to how have they been able to effectuate the achievement of those? So that's the only other comment. You've got definitely stated here repeatedly, board priorities and outcomes, board direction. It's really fantastic. Is there anything else you think needs to be summarized so that we've got good closure? It looks like Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Treese have additional comments, and maybe others.
I just wanted to say that Pam said it well on, this is something that we have been looking at. I know we've had a number of conversations about this, so this is a great job, Latricia. You did a good job. We had this conversation when you first started, and so I think you have, you've done a good job on this task. So we look forward to how that rolls out over the next couple of years. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
The only comment I wanted to add quickly is on that 30 to 40. One of the things that I would be interested in looking at too is maybe there's times when it's a sliding opportunity, where we fund high in the beginning and lower as an organization establishes itself. So I just wanted to throw out that I'm flexible in relationship to what our criteria is there.
I'll say from prior experience in working particularly with some Metro grant community engagement, it's one thing to support an event with a higher percentage. It's another thing with regard to a partner's budget for more organizational things. So I think that I would have a real problem with supporting a range for an organizational partner budget of higher than 50%. They really have to make sure they have diversity of funders. Even a new organization, they can't expect government, right? Because then there's confusion over, is this really a quasi-government organization? And looking at what those IRS rules are, so on and so forth. So I have a difference of opinion there about how where there might be a top range, just based upon practical experience is where I'm coming from. That's all. And everyone's experience varies. So I'm not saying I disagree with your experience at all, but rather based upon mine. Any other thoughts? Do you want to summarize, Ms. Angie and Ms. Tillman, what you've heard for direction and next steps?
So direction and next steps, we will proceed with the 2-year framework for the discretionary funding as discussed in today's conversation. We have received great feedback on the year 2 process. And so we will follow up with the board at a future meeting with a greater we continue to share information of the board's conversation. So helping on kind of that journey and that change management. And I know that's something that Commissioner Fye had previously requested. We don't want to surprise our community partners that there will be a change.
So Ms. Angie, back to you. Where do we stand with regard to your section of the agenda?
So those were the materials that I had planned and the team had planned to cover today. If there's any other questions, thoughts, looming inquiries for the budget process priorities, this would be the time to raise them from the board. Thank you. We'll proceed.
I think that's it for this section of the roundtable agenda. Is there anything else board members want to bring up before we move on to we'll have to figure out the timing with regard to our executive session, given that it's 7 minutes past 12. But anyway, first, just on the whole roundtable, any last commissioner information needs or sharing? Nope. Okay. So, Mr. Carr, how would you like to proceed? I as one can hang in there for a full 30-minute exec session.
I don't think this will take 30 minutes. So I think my preference would be just go ahead.
Great.
Staff is waiting.
Okay. So
ready.
with that, commissioners, do we have a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub H to discuss potential litigation? We see a motion from Commissioner Rogers, a second from Commissioner Treese. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand. Thank you, commissioners. It's 5-0. So now we need to go look for the executive session Zoom link.
Yes, and I will see you over there in just 1 minute, commissioners.
Thank you.